Hi everyone, welcome to the FM Scout YouTube channel. So in today's video, we're going to take you through not necessarily just the best, but also the most realistic homegrown players in England that you can buy. I'm sure most of you would have seen now, if you're playing in England, you can only sign up to 6 under 21 players from abroad in a season. And it makes it slightly more difficult to get the team full of your South American wonder kids early on. So you have to be a bit more clever about how you build your squad. Obviously, we're all aware of the 8 homegrown players and 4 homegrown players by club rules in the Champions League. There's a couple of ways around that. I mean, you don't have to register 25 players, so if you register only 23, you can take 2 of those down. And also, if you're looking for a backup player and you realise you've already maxed out your non-homegrown slots, and you need a homegrown player to either come and compete for a first-team place or be a really good backup at the very least, this will be a good video for you. So just to make it clear at the start, we're not going to go through the very top players that are almost impossible to get in any save. So people like Trent, Phil Foden to some degree, Reece James, players that are worth like 150, 200 million that are just almost impossible to get. If the stars align, they get an injury at the wrong time, and the manager they've got at the time doesn't play them, they could get unhappy and you might be able to get them. We're just going to leave those ones out. So this is going to be players that you should be able to buy at some point. So some of them are pretty good. Some are younger players you may not have heard too much of, but they're all realistic players that you should be able to sign at least after the first season. So this video is designed for players that are mostly out on field under 25 years of age, a year or 2 plus into your save, so not the first transfer window, but as you get promoted, if you're somebody like Nottingham Forest here, or just as you're going through your save, you're going to come across these players who are going to be improving, good players, and should be cheap enough for you to buy as either as a backup or as a starting player, depending on the club that you're at, obviously. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through each position. I'm going to give you 2 players. One player to be more like a starting level player now, and then one like cheaper alternative option that would be there more as just a backup option, or potentially a younger player just to keep an eye on as they go through the save. I know I'm going to upset some of you, some of these selections. Just remember that there are some players that we're not selecting, some of the very top players, so that's why some of them aren't in the list. Let's just remember that as we go through here one by one. Okay, so the first goalkeeper is Jordan Pickford. Now, before you complain, there's a big difference between a player on Football Manager and a player in real life. Now, a lot of people do seem to complain about Jordan Pickford in real life. I personally think he gets a bit more criticism than he deserves, but in any case, on Football Manager in particular, he's actually a very good goalkeeper. Always has been for me, and he's normally available like straight away. You can get him for, I guess, about 20, 25 million pounds if you use 50% of the next sale. But in any case, within the first couple of years, whatever his valuation is, you can get him for around that, if not a bit cheaper. And if you're somebody who, let's say, your Forest get promoted first season, and in that second season in the Premier League, you need some more homegrown players, you might need a starting goalkeeper, Pickford to be around for a decent price. The alternative is David Raya. I really like David Raya on Football Manager. I always have for the last few years. He's homegrown. He's a really good goalkeeper. You can get him straight away at the start of the game. If you're a top side, if you're playing as one of the top 4, top 5 teams in England from the very beginning, you can get him straight away first transfer window. He's a good goalkeeper that's quite mobile. He's very good at sweeping and playing out from the back. He tries to play his way out of trouble. He's a really good solid player. You can normally get him for less than his value here. It says 15 to 19 with us playing as Forest, but he's normally easy to get and is willing to leave Brentford as well. Left back, Bukayo Saka. Now, there shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but the reason he makes the list is because I've always found him quite easy to get off of Arsenal, whether I'm starting as a top club, whether it's a couple of years in. They always seem to be willing to let him go, and he never seems to like develop beyond where he's at for some reason on my saves, but he's always available to get. They're always happy to let him go. If you're stuck for a homegrown player, you need like a starting level player that's not going to cost you too much in wages, and it will cost you not an arm and a leg really going into the futures. It says this is his value now, but you can get him for a lot cheaper than this, especially if you use percentage of the next sale. And yeah, solid player, really good attacking left back if you play with an attacking left back, and I'm pretty sure most of you will. Rico Henry, his valuation's gone up a lot apparently this year. He's still available to get for quite cheap, and Brentford have a very good chance of going down in the first couple of years. And if they do, his valuation drops and he's a lot easier to get. Moving on to the right back, we have Hector Bellerin. He's taken a massive hit on his stats this year, it looks like, especially on the physicals. He's still worth, like it says, I think 19 to 31 million pounds. I think you can get him for quite cheap. It seems like he's available for like the lower end of the estimated value, if anything, even lower. Pablo Maffio. Now, on previous FMs, he's always been available for about, I don't know, 17, 15 million pounds. And he's always on low wages. I mean, if you can get his acceleration and pace up, I think he's a really, really good right back. But in any case, if he stays as he is, he's still a good right back. He's pretty good defensively, tackling 15 for what I consider normally a attacking right back. He's actually not too bad defensively as well. Again, one of those players that's always available, always easy to pick up if you've got the budget for him. So Pablo Maffio is a good option. Moving on to centre backs, we have Ben Godfrey. Ben Godfrey is always a player that I think you can pick up at some point. Depending on how Everton are doing, can depend on how much you have to pay, whether you have to pay like top money for him or slightly lower. But I think that no matter what kind of team you are, he's always a good option at the very least as a top level backup because he's so quick for a centre back. And you're going to see a theme here. We're going to give you two quicker centre backs and then two centre backs that maybe base more on technical mental attributes. But as a quick mobile centre back, Ben Godfrey is right up there. He's homegrown, expensive. I'm not too sure how much it's going to cost you depending on your save in FM22, but on FM21, you could always get him for quite a low amount, below 50 million normally. It might sound like a lot of money, but if you're paying out in instalments, it's never too much. Nathan Wood. Now, those of you that followed my Nottingham Forest save on my channel last year will not be surprised that this name has come up, and you're probably expecting to see this. Nathan Wood, he's had a bit of a knock on his attributes a little bit. He's out on loan to Hibs this year from Middlesbrough. He normally gets very, very quick for a centre-back, and if you're going to have a centre-back who's not quite there in mental and technicals, to have somebody that's physically really good always helps, and he's never going to cost you too much money, and he's probably a really good cheap alternative to Ben Godfrey. You can probably see with 4 or 5 years of development, when he catches up to Ben Godfrey's age, how he's going to be close enough where it shouldn't be too much of a difference, and definitely worth spending, 40 million less on Nathan Wood and paying, I don't know, a tenth of the wages, whatever Ben Godfrey's on. So it's definitely worth considering Nathan Wood as an option, if not getting him early. And just keep an eye on his development. Like on FM21, he used to develop really quickly, really well, and was always a top-level player for me. Moving on to midfielders, we have Declan Rice. Now, he fits the bill for a couple of reasons. One, we look at, is the player willing to leave his club? The answer is yes. And two, are the club willing to let him go for some sort of reasonable price? The answer is sort of yes. He's quite expensive at the start of the game. As the years go on, as West Ham, if they don't win any trophies and they don't really progress anywhere and they could go down, you could get him for a lot cheaper. You can see his contract. He's not on very much wages. There's a 3-year contract, or 3 years remaining on his contract anyway. So Declan Rice is an option for you to look at as a starting defensive midfield player. He's really good across the boards. Now, if you're looking for a cheap option, Lewis Cook has always been very good on Foot Manager. The last couple of years, he's been an outstanding player. Always ends up at one of the top clubs as like a deep line playmaker. He's very, very good. He starts off on the game with his damaged cruciate knee ligaments, and he's up for 7 to 8 months. But after he gets past that, he's only worth 8.8 to 14.5 million now. I just think you could get him for quite cheap. He's a really good, solid backup player for a deep line playmaker type role, I think, for a top club. And he could easily come in and start in most Premier League teams that aren't in European football, I would say, as well. He's very, very good. Jude Bellingham. Now, he's not going to be somebody you get first season. He'll cost you a lot of money. And again, the reason why he makes the list is I know everybody knows who Jude Bellingham is, or I would expect you to. He's somebody you can get. Borussia Dortmund, more often than not, don't win the league on the save. They don't win many trophies. He'll get unhappy and want to go to a bigger club. And once your club is big enough in England, like if you're starting off as a championship club and you're moving up, he will always be willing to come to you. And he's a really good option to get. He's not on a massive amount of wages. He'll cost you a lot of money. But he's always somebody that the club are willing to let go after a season or two. And he's always somebody that's willing to join. So keep an eye on him. He'll cost you a lot of money for one season. But if you've got the budget and you need a central midfield player, it's definitely worth bringing him in to be your starting central midfielder. Now, James Ward-Prowse is an option here. He's definitely not a replica of Jude Bellingham. Very different players. So Ward-Prowse isn't going to get you box-to-box very much. He's going to be a sitting and passing type midfield player, really. Not much physicals. He's got very good mentals and pretty good technicals. And with the way set pieces are going on for Foot Manager 2022, he could be a very good player to have. Like if you're looking to bring somebody in, if you're playing like a double pivot, he'd be a really useful player to have in a double pivot for a pretty cheap amount of money. Curtis Jones. Now you're going to say, why have you put Curtis Jones into this list? I'm going to tell you why. Liverpool normally buy top level players in your save. I think you'll notice that. While they're doing that, he normally doesn't get the game time that he should get, and I've noticed him to be available quite a few times, either with Forest. We had him on loan in my save on my own channel last year for a few years, but even on FM22, they just buy players and he just stops playing games. I think there could be quite a few saves on FM22 where either he's unhappy because he's not playing, or the club would then be willing to let him go, and those two things do seem to go hand in hand a little bit. That maybe he doesn't get unhappy enough to request a transfer, but when he gets to like 23, 24 years old and he's just a backup player, they're then willing to let him go, where they wouldn't be at 19 or 20 years old at the start of FM21 or FM22. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Adnan Januzaj, now he was available on FM21 quite easily to get as well. FM22 is exactly the same. He's just sort of in the middle, isn't he? Like he's not quite good enough mentally, I think, to be a top level number 10, and he's not really quick enough to be like a top level winger. He's sort of caught in between the two, but I would use him as a central midfield player as a number 10. He's a very good cheap alternative to some of the other attacking midfielders I'm sure you'll have. He's got good dribbling, passing vision's okay, his flair's good. So he's a really good player to have, I think, in the squad as a backup homegrown player. Going to move on to wide players or wide forwards really as well. So this is like a combination really, these wide players. They could also be strikers as well, some of them as well. Eddie Nketiah. Now he's available for quite cheap early on at Arsenal. You can get an offer accepted for him, but in my experience on FM22 already, if you try and go for him and get an offer accepted, they'll also offer him a new contract. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but you could get him in your very first transfer window. If not, keep an eye on him. They won't play him. He'll get unhappy and he will be available. And I could use him, I think, as a striker in like a two-man strike force or as a wide player in a three. Either way, I think he's pretty good to do both and a good alternative option as a homegrown player for you there. Marcus Edwards, he could have got on the list as a number 10, but I've got him down as a winger just because of the players, the way they fell. He could be either. He's a really good player to have, I think. I've had him a few times, and I've never really used him as a starting player, only as a backup. But whenever he's been a backup, he's been very, very good. He's sort of caught between a bit like Januzaj with being a number 10 and a wide player. He lacks in a couple of areas, but I still think he's a really good player to have. You can get him for a lot cheaper than this, and he's always willing to leave and come back to England. So, and keep an eye on the wages as well. He's on quite low wages, so he's a good cheap alternative to some of the other number 10s you might have. Marcus Rashford. Now, before you give me anything in the comments, just wait a second here. So, I've noticed, I think on FM21, I bought him in almost every save where it was a long-term save. He was always somebody that you could buy. What tends to happen is they end up buying, United do, like lots of world-class strikers, where it's new-gen strikers, existing strikers. They just buy multiple world-class strikers and wide players. And he often becomes one of the players that just misses out. And I've had saves where he's been unhappy and requested a transfer. I've seen saves where they're just willing to just let him go for a nothing price. Like the estimated value there, it'd be much less than that. He's not somebody to look at for the first season, but maybe in that second season, third season, and fourth season, when he starts getting to 26, 27 years old, and he's had a couple of years where he's not being used, but he'll be on a big contract, he'll have a big player reputation. So the club are probably willing to let him go when you get to that sort of point. He may request a transfer. I don't think I've seen it yet on FM22, but definitely on FM21, I've seen it. And he's just somebody that you need to keep an eye on because you could easily get him, especially if you're not a rival club. I think if you're playing as a rival, playing as Liverpool or playing as Manchester City, maybe not so much. But if you're a club that's playing through the league, you're just coasting your way up there, you might find yourself in a position to sign Marcus Rashford. And again, just somebody who makes the list because he's somebody that is normally available at some point soon in the save. And we have here Serge Gnabry. Serge Gnabry can play either side on the wings. He can almost play as a 10, not quite good enough for passing and vision. Really good player, really good to have as a player in the squad. He's homegrown. Bayern normally let him go, especially second season. They're quite willing to let him go. Because in the second season, if he doesn't sign a new contract, he goes into the last year of his contract then, 2022, 2023. So you can get him for a lot less than the value was here. He's always willing to go. They're always willing to sell him. So he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. You could sign him in the first season quite easily. I'd say in the first couple of seasons, he's more a player for. So he'd almost be like somebody you'd get before somebody like maybe Rashford. And if he could apparently play wing back as well. Would not recommend that. But yeah, Serge Gnabry is our next player on the list. Mason Greenwood. Now, it's just a carbon copy situation and scenario from the Marcus Rashford thing. I've seen Mason Greenwood also be available for the same exact reason that Rashford becomes available. United tend to buy new gens and world-class players, and Rashford and Greenwood normally are the ones that get left out. And I've seen before where the club are just willing to let him go. I don't think I've seen him request a transfer before, but I've had Greenwood a couple of times on FM21 where he's just fallen out of favour, not playing. He's like 24, 25 years old, not playing in the first team. I don't know if that'll be the same on your save. You might have a save where Ronaldo and Cavani both injured early. He starts every game in the first season, just carries on. It could be that he just doesn't ever play. Again, just somebody to look out for. He could be somebody that is available and is, considering the kind of player he can become, could be very cheap, considering the fact that he's going to be very, very good and homegrown. Those players are not normally ever that cheap, but you could get him for a decent amount. Again, keep an eye on him, see how he's doing. And the last player on our list is Tammy Abraham. Tammy Abraham is very, very good this year, I think. His stats look very good. 6'5", he's got pace, he's got decent acceleration, finishing, first touch. He's pretty solid across the board. Like, if he got his dribbling up by 1, I'd say he looks like a top-level striker. Runs with ball rarely, not too happy with that. But apart from that, I like everything else that he's got to offer. Because he's not homegrown in Roma, they don't really treat him like a premium player. So give it a couple of years, 25 years old, he could be very easy to get and could be a top-level player for you to bring in, and he's homegrown. And that is going to do it. Now, in our list that we've just done, there are so many notable mentions I could give out here. We just don't have the time to do it. And some of you might be saying that, why isn't Phil Foden on the list? Because I managed to get him on a save. And there are definitely players like Phil Foden, Reece James maybe. They could be players that you could, once in a while, get on your save. If the stars align, you could probably sign them for your saves. Phil Foden actually is somebody I've signed before on FM21. So he could make the list, but I'm expecting him to be more difficult to sign this time round. We'll see. Maybe it's the same case and you can still get Phil Foden. I've always found Reece James and Trent really hard to get, especially Trent on Foot Manager. I don't think I've ever signed Trent on a save. Like I said, there are so many other players that we could have thrown into this video. So what we'll probably do is we might do a second one of these later on in the season with everybody we didn't mention. And then maybe include some younger players that, you know, could be somebody to watch out for to become decent enough to get into a squad. Maybe not absolute wonder kids, but players that do improve enough to potentially be an option for you to put in your squad. If there's somebody you think we should have included that we've missed, put the comment down below. Let us know who it is, how much you can buy them for, when you think they'll be available. Depending on a couple of factors, obviously. You can never really predict what team's going to get relegated and everybody saves. So that makes a big difference on who's available and how much you pay for them. But if there's anybody you think we've missed, feel free to put it down below. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.